Rate those.
Recording's on. Okay. Now we're going to call this meeting to order. Public notice of this meeting pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act has been given by the board secretary on April 25th and 28th in the following manner. Posted notice on the school bulletin board at the administration building, transmitted to the Courier Post, Philadelphia Inquirer, and the clerk of Cherry Hill Township. Please join me in rising for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mrs. Sugars, would you call roll, please?
Mrs. Arroyo, Ms. Stratton, Mrs. Fleischer,
Here.
Ms. Friedel,
Here.
Mr. Mayor,
Here.
Dr. Rude,
Here.
Ms. Stern,
Here.
Mrs. Tong,
Here.
Mr. Avadia.
Here. All right. Yep. All right. We're going to start with public comment. Oh, wait a second. I forgot about. Okay. Let me read something. All righty. Cherry Hill is a community that values education. Issues that affect our children, schools, and community bring out strong emotions in all of us. The Board of Education takes seriously its vision to work with civility. Please join the board in sending a message that to our students and with our students, that even the most difficult issues can be addressed while showing respect for one another. And with that, I will look in the room, and then I will look, seeing none in the room, to the assembled folks online, where I also do not see any hands. And therefore, we will close the public comment session of this evening in order to next go to superintendent comments.
I have nothing at this time, Mr. Avadia. And with the board, I know is anxious for the discussion about the goals, and Mr. Adams, so I'm going to turn it right back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Malash. So Jesse Adams, back by popular demand of this and many other boards, will be taking us into our discussion of district goals for the evening. And he did such an amazing job last year. We're certainly thank him for giving up his time to instruct us and help move us forward. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Jesse Adams from New Jersey School Boards Association.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. I'm someone I can be heard out there in the world out there. Appreciate the opportunity to come back. Actually, I don't think my job is going to be as complex as it was last year, because your superintendent shared with me some documents that he shared with you on how the current year is going as far as the goals and objectives that you worked very hard last year to set. And then he provided what potential recommendations he's making as the next set as we move forward. What I like about when I look through those documents is that it's a progression. It's not, we did something one year, now we go figure out something else and start again. His proposal is a building. It's basically he's putting together the building blocks for where you need to go within these areas. So once I looked at that, I said, I think that's where the focus needs to be. And if there are some other areas that maybe your superintendent may not have covered in some of the objectives or actions, then we can throw them on the board and have further discussion and for your superintendent to think about how they get intertwined. But last year we were pretty much looking at what y'all had last year is, at least from what I saw in the 2021, 2022 status and perspective. Is it working for you from the perspective of seeing indicators for success, getting report out, or where how your district is progressing as it relates to your district goals each year? I put out, gave a handout, which was just a board goal, a district goal, et cetera. Just brought it back. Part of your responsibilities as a board of education, what encompasses planning is all those kind of activity is within your sweet spot. It's part of your major role as a board of education. District goals, which are what we're talking about, right? One, obviously, it helps the focus are. It also by board for this year. Board goals, and they're typically focused on areas that you're strong in and those areas that you might towards if because just superintendents should have anywhere from 3 to 5 ECS before merit goals can be awarded for compensation to the superintendent. So those are the four big goal types in the district. And we're going to be focusing tonight on the district goals. So at this time, I'll turn it over to your superintendent to do an overview on your 2021 goals and how things are tracking, and then let him also then talk about what he and his team are recommending potentially as the continuation of some of the, in all of these areas.
Thank you, Jesse. And thank you, Jesse, as well, for being out here this evening and providing your guidance and your experience and your involvement as a board member and with New Jersey school boards. So we appreciate you all being here. For all the board members, last Friday, I had sent out to you in the weekly memo just an update of the action plan for the goals for 2021, 2022. We did a color coding of those just to show what has been completed and what is in progress, both green and yellow. Then there's a second document that is 2022, 2023 action plan with some recommendations about where we are moving forward. The administrative team, the members of Superintendent's Council, Mr. Plavinsky, Mr. Bart, who are all with us this evening, have all played a role in the achievement and the success in meeting these goals and the progress that we've made. Last year, as Jesse alluded to, was a different way of the development of the goals for us as an administrative group along with the board, just in terms of the process that we went through. The goals were adopted last October. Starting now, it'll be ideal for us to adopt the goals hopefully in July this year, which is a much better time frame as we prepare for the opening of the academic year. So I'm just going to kind of walk through the three goals. For a reminder, folks, it's 2022. We are little more than 2 years in to the three strategic planning goals, the overall umbrella goals that the board adopted in February of 2020. Those three goals, the first one is on student wellness. The second one is on purpose and passion. The third one is on connecting beyond our classrooms. We had a great deal of discussion as a community, an educational community, members of the district, members of the administrative team, parents, family members, staff members, about the development of those goals to provide those as the light that kind of guided the decision-making process for as a school district and where we wanted to hold ourselves. The development of the goals in the last year for the district grew out of those three goals. So I'll just start with the first one, which is student wellness. The objective strategy statement was developed with the board committee, with the subcommittee from the board that was working last summer. And under student wellness, create frameworks of learning and support for all students to develop the skills needed for social and emotional wellness. The objective and strategy was listed as provide inclusive and supportive learning environments that are responsive to student needs, promote professional learning for staff that provides consistency of social emotional learning best practices while promoting and fostering safe and secure learning environments. And if you recall, we developed this as an action plan as we went through the work to include major activities, the board and staff in terms of responsibility, resources, timelines, indicators of success. And then internally, we added that additional column that was board presentation. We tracked it out and planned it out in terms of when the information was going to be shared with the board. So we had that record of each of the steps that we went through where it came through for formal presentation to the board. So in our major activities, the first one was expand the work of the Student Wellness Committee to include representation from each school and promote social and emotional wellness and safety for all students. The administrative team, certificated and non-certificated staff were involved, resources in the Student Wellness Committee and Care Solace. Timeline was during the course of the 21-22 academic year. And then for this past year, we said that we would have subsequent annual goals to be developed. Indicators of success, minutes from committee meetings, parent and staff using Care Solace based on referral data, and then documentation of staff receiving SEL training and support. So we have accomplished each of those indicators of success during the course of this year. There has been a reformation and a larger involvement from the Student Wellness Committee. Mrs. Wethington or Ms. Mallory, I don't know if there's anything that you guys want to add to that work. I know Ms. Minchin out of the supervisor's office has led much of it, but I don't know if there's anything that you want to add. Okay, thank you. Second major activity, promote shared ethical and performance values visibly and comprehensively through district culture proficiency, equity, and character education work. Then again, in the acronym CPEACE, which is the acronym that we've used internally for that committee, administrative team and the CPEACE committee. Resources, the CPEACE long-range plan, analyzing data by population types, the equity survey through Hanover Research, anti-bias staff training, student codes of conduct, restorative practice, and student voice. We indicated this was going to be a multi-year activity in nature, just because of the breadth of what we were expecting to do and revise. Indicators of success, 5-year plan developed and presented to the board, which has not yet been revised, as CPEACE has, again, in a process of reforming during the course of this year. Revised student codes of conduct with Mrs. Wethington has provided updates on where we are with the committee work, where we expect to be in September, and presentation to the board with adoption next year. Action plan development following the Hanover Research Equity Survey. Survey, if you recall, was administered last November and into December. We had the formal presentation from Hanover just a few short weeks ago to the board. We are in the action planning part of the process now with Hanover. Anti-bias training records, and then CPEACE reports to the Board of Education 3 times before June 2022. So most of those are still in progress. In the CPEACE reporting, we did have 3 presentations on behalf of CPEACE to the board. You can see on the right-hand side just where those updates were and what they were. And we still expect, there's one more presentation. This is, I think, in the end of May, right? May 24th. And that will be
the CPEACE Exec Committee will talk about our work plan for the 5-year plan and how we're going to align the 5-year plan with the data from Hanover.
very good. Thank you. Third action step, assess and support populations with special needs, IEP 504 ELL, where state identified vulnerable populations, homeless, low income, LGBTQIA+, and home languages. Again, responsible groups, administrative team, board members, special ed parent advisory group, the CPAG. Survey using Hanover Research and the information through the survey. Again, something that's going to be, we expect to be multi-year in nature because of the breadth of where we are. And then the indicators of success, administer the Hanover Research Survey, analyze the results, present the results to the board, which was done. Superintendent and board members will meet with at least 20 families of students with identified special needs or state identified special populations. I think we've done 21 or 22 at this point, 22 that we've done at this point. Had some great discussions. We'll do a follow-up report or I'll have a follow-up report to the board that kind of summarizes all of that together. Then the fourth action statement was analyze school start and end times, discussions with students, staff, parents, and community. By the end of the academic year, present administrative recommendations to the full board, the administrative team, Board of Ed members, information from the American Academy of Pediatrics, extracurricular schedules, bus contracts, Hanover Research. Building-based committees will meet throughout the fall, report out to the board at regular intervals through January, possible multi-year goal. Dr. Morton, as you recall, has led this work in the district beginning last summer and then opening in the fall of the school year. Committees at the individual high schools and high school programs in a district-wide committee. We've had updated presentations. We just closed a thought exchange on the 24th of April. Dr. Morton will be sharing some initial information with the C&I committee tomorrow evening and with the full board during the work session on the 10th. And that work will be continuing. This is one of those, again, as we expected it to be multi-year, will be multi-year as we move forward. And as you all know, we're still awaiting to see if there's a change in legislation about school start times, which there has not been anything. Dr. Moore, we looked, it was April 6th, I think was the last time there was anything in the press about it after the most recent discussion with the legislature. So that was under student wellness.
Did you want to jump to the 2022 for that section? And that way they have it fresh in their mind as you're
Absolutely.
going through the whole thing and then them having to try and remember back what you said on the other ones. I think that might be a
Absolutely.
cleaner
Great
way to do
suggestion.
this.
So when you look at the other one, now this is not color coordinated. The objective strategy, we did not, as we were making changes in the action plan, we left that with the board. I know the board's going to have subcommittee and for board discussion tonight. Expected that to come more in discussion right from the board piece. So major activities, The first one, continue the work of the Student Wellness Committee to include the revision of the S-12 procedure and expanded parent education. This grew out of the work from Student Wellness Committee this year. S-12, for those of you that are not as familiar with it, is the procedure that we use in response to suicidal or homicidal ideations. The follow-up is we have an incredibly overdeveloped policy because of the history that we have in Cherry Hill. Through a lot of what's gone on over the course of the last 2 years, we believe that that needs some revision and some work. So that will be a primary focus of student wellness. And then expanding our parent education programs and what it is that we're able to offer to parents and to families, again, coming in response to the work and then what we heard back from this year. Again, similar board and staff resources are similar timeline, 22-23. Indicators of success, minutes from the committee meetings, revised S-12 procedure, Care Solace staff training, which we're right now scheduling for September, parents and staff using Care Solace based on referral data, documentation of parent education opportunities, and participation to include. Second major activity, promote shared and ethical and performance values visibly and comprehensively through district cultural proficiency, equity, character education work, the work of the CP's committee. Now you'll see that major activity is the same as it was in the current academic year. Similar board and staff has developed a little bit differently in terms of resources. Long-range plan, analyzing data by population types will continue. The root cause analysis through Hanover Research, again, which came out of the recommendations from Hanover and our next steps in the planning of what to do with that information. Continued anti-bias training, student codes of conduct to include restorative practices, the restorative practice lens, student voice work, again, continuing to be multi-year in nature. Indicators of success, continuation with the 5-year plan developed and presented to the board, continuation with the revised student codes of conduct. The action plan, this is new, development following the root cause analysis through Hanover, anti-bias training records, and then CPs reporting to the Board of Education at least twice before June of 2023. Then turning over to additional action steps. Again, number 3 is the same in language for the action step as for the current academic year. Assess and support populations with special needs, IEP 504 ELL, or state identified vulnerable populations, homeless, low income, LGBTQIA+, and home languages. Similar, although a little bit expanded in terms of the resource groups, the people involved to include not just the CPAG, but CHACA and CHICA, survey and the work from Hanover Research, again, continuing to be multi-year in nature. And then the only thing that we've included thus far in terms of indicator of success is expanding the work that we've done with the board and I having the opportunity to meet with families and focusing specifically based on the Hanover Research of meeting with 20 families of ELL and Latinx students. So to have that as our primary focus as we do family meetings next year. Number 4, a bit of an adjustment from that 4th action step from this current year, and this is to analyze school start and end times, discussion with students, parents, and community. Again, similar groups, but to expand staff, students, and community. Similar in terms of the background information that we will rely upon. District committee will meet throughout the fall, updating the board once per month through December 2022. We expect that something is going to happen with formal legislation to come out from the state. We would expect that that would happen before the end of the legislative term, which is the end of next month. If not, then it'll take some additional time to be reintroduced later in the fall. We don't expect that a whole lot will change dramatically before the election in November. But Dr. Morton and the committee will continue to meet. We'll be expanding the committee. We'll expect to see elementary representation on the committee. And again, looking at what those start times, we'll revisit with the contractors and with transportation. And we would expect that later in the fall or in December, we'll have another set of recommendations to the board, about revision of start times involving the 3 levels. Right. Yeah, draft report recommendations made to the Board of Ed in January of 2023.
So for that goal area, questions, board, open it up for any questions or comments that you may have on what your superintendent and his team are recommending for a continuation with some modifications for a couple of items in those areas. Like I said, when I went through all of this, I saw progression, which was nice to see.
Ms. Friedel?
Thank you. And thank you, Jesse, for coming once again. Nice to see you. Dr. Malash, thank you for the update. A couple of questions, comments. So starting with the update for this year with CPs. I'm only counting 2 meetings, not 3, that from the indicators of success. And so Hanover Research has replaced CPs in the presentations because
Now, the African American Studies update was the first presentation from CPs.
okay, so that date wasn't on here. Is that because 412 was Hanover Research? And then 524 will be the one that you just talked about, but there's not 3 dates.
We have,
I think Joe's starting with AA studies up.
yeah, African American Studies update
Oh,
222.
okay, and not putting.
Yeah, code of conduct.
Gotcha, okay.
and then
But
Hanover.
now to next year.
Yes.
With all the work being done with code of conduct, and all of the things, I would like to ask for at least 3 updates. You know, coming into the fall or early winter, end of year, just because there's so much analysis and data and work that's being done. I don't know how other board members feel, but I think that
So
would be,
like a fall, winter, spring,
yeah, like a
piece.
fall, yeah, yep.
right?
I just
Fall after the
kind,
first of the year.
yeah, or March and then May, or, you know, February and May. I don't,
Right.
I'll leave the timeline, but I just think there's so much to digest. That 3 would be a little more
Break it up.
manageable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody in agreement with that?
Not yet. Because we got Ms. Stern. Who's going to go next? Oh, wait, are you done? With the 3, okay. Oh, with
With that
Oh, okay.
request for a modification of the reporting.
Oh, Jess, you're asking a lot for day 1, but all right. Yeah, I mean, yeah. 3 is better than 2. Let's see how this iterates over the next 3 months. Who's next? Yes, Ms. Stern, you go next.
Okay, so thanks again for all this. It's very exciting. I also just want to thank you for, I don't think I thank you publicly, Dr. Malash, for posting the goals in every school that I've been in. I've seen them posted, and I just think it's a recognition of a clear path where we're trying to progress to. So I think along the lines of what Ms. Friedel was saying, you know, I think and this is something I guess I want to say to the full board is that, you know, we're going to be, there's just, you know, was put out to the full board. People were interested in working on goals. Some people doing some more work, continuation what Dr. Malash was referring to. And, you know, there's some people have expressed interest, and now that's set in motion for May. So that's going to be happening in smaller groups, which I think will be great. Just a continuation kind of what we did last year, but a larger group of people involved. So I think tonight I was also just hoping to, you know, kind of gather any ideas, whether tonight or actually going forward through email or whatever, so that this group is making sure that we're representing the entire voice of the board in, you know, in this. So I think, Kim, I took notes on what you were saying. But just to kind of just put that out there generally, I definitely want, I think we've started the process of discussing issues of code of conduct, kind of our approach to discipline and HIBs. There's been a lot of discussion about that. So I see that as something that we'll probably start to look at is also somehow working into this. I think I would like a little more definition and clarity about the expectation of what is CPs is expected to look like. For instance, I didn't necessarily know that like the African American Studies presentation was like the CP's presentation, so to speak. And I didn't realize that CP's had was being restructured this year. So just, I think, clarification about that and kind of who's involved and what the expectation is, how that's going to look. So we're just more clear. And then these are just some of my initial thoughts. Regarding number 3, I think that, you know, there's been a good start with these meetings. I'd like to see a little more meat on the bones about how the information that's been gleaned this year from these special populations so far this year happened to be focusing more on students with special needs, IEPs, 504s. I'd like to know what we're doing with that and a kind of a plan for next year. I think it's important to continue gathering information and on a multi-year basis, making sure we're looking at all of our special populations. But now that we have some really good information, I think we can start to take some action with it. More beyond kind of just not just, but beyond assessing. Like I'd like to see more action with that. So that's something, we'll talk about more and we can work on more, but that's my input on it. Unless anybody disagrees with that or, okay, thanks.
Mrs. Fleischer?
Thank you so much. And thank you, Jesse. And thank you, Dr. Malash and the rest of the team for this amazing goals and all the information that you put through with it. So I really appreciate all the work that you've done. I had two things. One is the first thing, I agree with Ms. Stern about the information that we've gleaned from all the families that we've spoken with. It's been an amazing experience and I'm really happy that we had this as one of our goals. And I think the families that we've spoken with have also felt that they've been able to be heard by us and by, Dr. Malash and also the board. But it's interesting, they all have such interesting stories, but there are some things that are the same. There's similarities in some of these stories. So to find out what we can do just to help the district as far as maybe, some goals as far as making sure people feel that they're being heard and that things are a little bit more streamlined, or if they bring up an idea that is consistent through all the different stories, that we're listening to them and that there's follow through. So I agree. I'm not sure exactly how, like what Ms. Stern said, but I think that would be wonderful because we're going to come through with a big report soon. And just to see, okay, so now where do we go from there? So I think weaving that in. The other thing that I had a question on, and it's more of a question than anything, and it's sort of an overarching question. So when we had our survey for the Hanover study, we were, from what I understand on the 12th, it was sort of like a snapshot really of all this information that they got. And really our full section, the first section, every resource is mentioning the Hanover research. And I just want to make sure that we all have all the information that you have. Because if you're basing some of the things and some of the goals on things maybe we haven't been told or, just, presented on, I just want to see if there's things that you can present to us or at least allow us to have a little bit more insight into any more of the information that they gave to you. So I'm not sure, if that is something that's needed or if it's something we can get. But I'm just thinking it's such an important part of this full question. It's on every single part of it that I just want to make sure we're all educated enough to go forward. Thank you.
Let me just add respond to a couple of things, just because Ms. Stern brought up and Ms. Fleischer, you brought up as well about the information from the parent meetings. So I'll put together a final report that, collates puts all the information together. It analyzes the information that we received, the themes that we heard come through. I'll follow up specifically because of what the content is with Ms. Mallory and her team. And then we'll follow up with the building principals, when we start our administrative retreat at the end of June. And from there, we'll develop action steps about what will take in place. We can certainly develop how do we include that in here, right? And what does that look like? In some ways, it almost has to be a part of a multi-year goal because it will never be finished. Like that's something that isn't finished before the end of the, of the closeout of them. But we can talk about process-wise what that looks like, and certainly we can share that with the board. The board will get a copy, obviously, of what I put together. And then the families we met with will also get a copy of that. I told all of them when we met with them that they would get those. But then we'll develop action steps of this is what we want to do, this is what we want to address. And there are pieces of it, I can tell you anecdotally, that some of it is about education, right? That we are educating parents in a different manner, so that they have information that some of them do not have. And then we're educating staff members in a different manner so that they have information, right? As things change to go through. In terms of the Hanover research, Ms. Wethington, I know we talked, you're looking at doing some update again this week. Are you doing an update tomorrow with Hanover or no?
Tomorrow at CNI committee, we're talking about next steps with Hanover. I think Mrs. Fleischer's question was more about the data, which we'll have to talk to Hanover because there's so much in there. There are specific things that you want to know. We could run a report, but we can't give access. We have, because we only have a certain number of licenses to access. We can't even give it to the principals. So that's something that we're trying to work through with them. So if there are data points that you're interested in, we could certainly run reports out of that for you. Not a problem.
Thank you, Mrs. Wessenting. I guess I'm not really speaking so much as about certain data, but sort of, if there's things that you all are looking at that is going to help us attain our goals, just to make sure that we understand the data that you're looking at that point. Does that make
Okay,
sense? Like if it's
okay,
a separate
okay.
data than we've seen before, that's
Okay.
all. And it might, honestly, it could come out of the CNI when you're having that discussion.
Yeah.
That could be covered with what I'm thinking. And
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure, like this is my first time going through the goals and just wanting to sort of get, making sure that I have all the information that's needed. But what you're doing at CNI might be what I'm looking for.
It might be. Okay. And we can
Thank
talk
you.
more about it.
Okay.
And
Or
Mrs.
your
Wennington,
question.
when the, again, little subcommittee, right, of the board gets together about the goals, maybe we can sit down and kind of walk through the dashboard a little bit
We could do that. Yes.
as well,
Yes. we could do
to be able to
that.
take a look and see what that looks like. Because I think that's the hard part, right? Is it's contained within an interactive dashboard. It's not, it's an intact data set that exists, but the way that they have it set up to make it a little bit more user friendly on this end is an interactive dashboard. But let's talk about what that looks like. We can talk some more tomorrow night too, as you give the next steps in presentation.
Okay.
I think as an outsider listening, what I heard was that, this report is driving a lot of actions. And I think you're just looking for, if it's driving an action, you just want to see what kind of results are feeding to that. And I think it's not necessarily seeing every bit of data. It's if it's driving one of our actions, make us aware so that we have a feel for what data got us to the actions that we're doing.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you so much, Jesse. Appreciate that.
All right, Dr. Rude, you're next.
So part of my question is more about procedure. So maybe Miriam and Jesse can kind of help with this. So in terms of because this is my first time at a district goals planning, and I'll be on the planning committee as well. So what's my range look like? What does my fence look like? Am I looking at each one of these goals and saying, well, this could be worded differently, or I'd like to see this as an indicator of success? How granular am I going into
Yeah,
this plan that
I
the
think,
superintendent's provided?
let me take that first comment you made about is this worded. You really don't want to get that into the weeds, but when you're looking at the overall concept of the goals,
Yeah.
and these goals are built around your strategic plan. That's what they used last year, which was a great way to go.
Yeah.
We recommend if you have a strategic plan, let that be your North Star to drive your goals. So they established their goals last year. And like I said, Dr. Malash is basically recommending we don't just start and stop, we build.
We grow, yeah.
And so I think to your second point of indicators of success, that's perfectly within, hey, looking if you have a recommendation for another area or another indicator of success, that's what this is about. So you could throw that on the table and what rationale you may have, and the board and Dr. Malash can kick it around, and it may be something they agree. Yeah, that would be something we should look at as a potential indicator of success.
So looking at, if there's a major activity that we feel is missing, that's the kind of thing we'll be talking about adding in and figuring out how you guys are how the administration is going to show us,
Yeah.
kind of the
Yes.
build up to and the success in okay.
Yeah, so tonight is kind of the full board giving input with Jesse's guidance and Dr. Malash's input on, I'm sorry, Mr. Adams. Were you very formal? We should be formal with everybody.
You're a lot more
Apologize. Mr.
formal than I'm
Adams,
used
Dr.
to, so.
Dr. Rude. It's for all of us to give the input together, and then our smaller group will start to kind of hone in a little more granularly, hard one. And also I think look at where are there some gaps, are there some like new ideas that, any of us want to introduce, and how do we weave that in without overwhelming, because there's a lot here,
Yeah.
but how do we, or are there things we want to pivot a little bit on? So it's really just an open discussion as I see it.
Yeah, this is the opportunity. Dr. Malasha and his team have put together what they're recommending for the next year and what they want to build on. This is your opportunity to ask questions about that. And that's why I felt it was best to, when he covered 2021, let's go right to 2022 in this area versus all three and then having to bounce back. So you can see that building block and then ask questions. But this is also the opportunity, if there's something else you want to throw on the board for the board to consider and for Dr. Malash to consider as an action or as a potential objective, this is the time to do that. So this is your opportunity as a board. In fact, I failed in the beginning to talk about my process. What I typically like to do is I let the superintendent and talk about the previous year's goals, and then the superintendent has an opportunity to talk about what he and his team are recommending. I like to hear the educational leader first, then open it up for if there are other ideas, other things that board members want to consider, we get that on the table. So yes, this is your opportunity. If you have something that you don't see covered and you say, I'd like to see us maybe focus on X, Y, and Z, we'll throw it up on the board. And at some point tonight, we'll discuss it. And the consensus will either be yes or no. And then if it's a yes, then Dr. Malash will weave it into the package that he's working on for the current year.
Thank you all for the feedback. That was very helpful for me and hopefully for you guys too, because you're new with me. And I'll just finish this with so one comment that I think when we get to our smaller groups that I want to focus on is mental health. I see under that number one, I see resources, the mental health task force. But I don't see really beyond suicide prevent the S12. I don't see, there's no other major activities there. And one of the biggest problems I've seen, I guess, with my own children, with my children talking about their friend groups and through the meetings with families is anxiety. And I know that part of that is the pandemic. A big part right now for a lot of people is the pandemic. But I've also, heard from parents, and we've heard at meetings, parents of high schoolers, and just the level of stress that they're under to achieve, and how they never feel good enough. They never feel like they're, I get the sense that a lot of kids just at the end of the day, they have anxiety over like where they stand in the world. And I'd love to come up with a way to at the very least discuss in our goal meetings, that how can we reduce the stress and anxiety of our students? Because when you're stressed and anxious, you learn more poorly. Like that's a biological fact. Like when your stress hormones are afloat, you're not processing optimally. So I would really love for, that's something that I will be bringing up when we have our smaller goal meetings. And if anybody has ideas, that I'd love to hear those. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Thank you for being here, for helping us work through this. Just quickly, Dr. Root, I'd support your last observation, and we look forward to working along those lines with regards to issues that could help students with anxiety. But the question I had really goes back again to Dr. Malash and Ms. Wethington with regards to the Hanover data. The dashboard that was described, that we saw a little bit of manipulation there. Is the dashboard something that's available to each of us now, or that's one of the licensed limited tools that we don't have access to right now?
Yeah, so the dashboard requires a login, and we have a certain number, like Dr. Malash has one, Dr. Morton, Dr. Mahan, myself, it may be the four of us. I think that might be it. That allows us to go to the equity scorecard and look at the data that Hanover showed you, and they were splicing different things and comparing things. That's in the equity scorecard. You can do all that in that dashboard, which we have limited access to.
But again, following up to Ms. Fleischer's comments and also Dr. Malash, if for instance, there were, a handful of queries that I might be interested in looking at, whether, in assistance to the full board or in my role as liaison to the CP's committee, however that's going to work out. I could send that to you, copy the appropriate personnel, and then, you could run those queries.
Yeah, I would send it to Dr. Malash. Yes, we could run different queries for you. Yeah.
And I would say, Mr. Mayor, they would really come like through a committee or through a group or through board leadership. Like there's always that balancing piece.
Sure.
Right,
and I
of,
appreciate that.
yeah, just
to make
process-wise.
sure, my process.
Yeah, like they need to have a
works out.
home. I mean, Mr. Avati has been good with this as we've gone through this spring. When we talk about different things that are happening, it's got to have a home, somewhere to be operated with. And that's where you would feed it through, is in that process. And say, all right, so the board is asking for, so then we're presenting it to the board, just process wise.
I pledge to work within the rules, but thank you for bringing that up.
We like a
All right.
structure, right? We like where's the fence?
Thank you.
Ms. Friedel, we'll come back to you.
Sorry, just one other question. With number 3, where you were conducting the district and board members were conducting the parent interviews, and this year it was 504's IEPs. When families were selected, I'm assuming it was like an internal process through the schools. Were any families who crossed populations part of this? So were there any ELL families who had IEPs or 504s that were part of these conversations? Because everybody's experience is going to be different, but when you have a non-English speaking family or a bilingual family who's now has a child with an IEP, their struggles or situations may be very different from another family. So, I don't know if that occurred. And if not, if it's something that we could consider moving forward in next year's round, that when possible, if we have families who are in more than one of the categories, that they somehow be part of this process.
Thanks, Ms. Friedel. Yes, most of the recommendations for the families came directly from the buildings. And we provided a description to the building administrators of, we're looking at somebody that represents this category. And then Mrs. Cohen, when names and families were suggested, because we also wanted a wide range across the spectrum of classifications and programs, right? So we had in-district programs, we had out-of-district programs, and we had the full range from the alternative high school to Barclay, and then from in-class support to a self-contained, right, program to go through. There were definitely some that would have been in multiple categories for that. A small, probably, and I can include that. I'll when we go through, I know for sure, there's 2 in my mind that I know for sure represent multiple categories. And it was also interesting, right? Because some of the families, were identified for one child, and you go through and many families had multiple children and multiple experiences, right? Both with an IEP, with a 504, different, things. So that was kind of fascinating as well. Yeah, good question.
Mrs. Elmore Stratton.
Thank you, Mr. Avati. I just had one question about number 3, the assessing and support populations of special needs, ELL. For that one, I know you have to meet with the 20 families, but should it be more detailed to say like what that's going to result in, or what areas they're going to be assessed and supported in? I mean, I know we're assessing and supporting. That was kind of the same we had last year. I guess maybe I'm taking it too detailed, but just something to like, I hate for us to just be having the meetings, but then what? I guess, I don't know.
And Ms. Elmer, I think that ties in with what Ms. Fleischer was asking and Ms. Stern were asking as well, right? About what's that action plan look like? And we can certainly find some way to include that in here. It's just the documentation of that typically doesn't occur until June, July-ish, like it would be on the following year when it would be developed, with the time frame. But because we're looking at them as multi-years, and this came, from Mr. Adams working with us last summer, as we looked at multiple year goals. One of my biggest frustrations for a long time, and if you look at other school districts doing goals, is most of the goals that are listed are literally 6 or 7 month goals, and they're very closed ended. There's almost nothing that we do in education that is a closed-ended 6 or 7 months that it takes place. And if we are, then it is something that literally is very concrete, or is budget related or something like that because of what it is. When you look at the development of children, where they are, what's happening, how you adjust, how you make things, it typically goes over years. So we can certainly include language, to that effect to go through. I think that's good. Because yes, you meet with them and then, so what, right? They tell you and then what, right?
Mrs. Collins?
Did you, I remember, I heard you say on that action too, that you were, at the end of the year, meetings were held, you were going to do kind of a summary. So
Yes.
I don't know if you caught that. I heard that when
Yeah,
you
so
was
we'll do a summary, like a summary report, or I'll do a summary report. And then because of what the topic was this year, they're focused on typically children with IEPs or 504s. Miss Mallory is our director of special ed. I'll meet with Miss Mallory and probably her team. We'll talk about next steps and what we found. They'll develop things that, about the education piece. As I said, education is one of the big pieces of it. We'll meet with the building principals because there are specific things that need to happen in some of our buildings as well, individually, as well as systemically in terms of what we have learned with people's experiences.
Yeah, and I think that would answer your question. Okay, we met and what? I
Right.
remember him saying we were going to give a summary at the end, and that probably will answer some of your questions of what
We
came
can-
out of them.
Yeah, and we can present that out to the board, what I mean? Share that out both in a written format, and then again, where's the home, right? In committee, what does that look like? Where does it go? But to be able to share that out.
Okay, Mrs. Tong, and then me, and then we're going to have to conclude goal number 1 so that we have time for the others.
Thank you, Mr. Avaria. Thank you, Mr. Jesse, coming here. It's very pleasure. And thank you. This is a very resourceful. This 4th year I'm in. This is the first time I actually got this thing. I have no idea what was going the first 2, 3, 4 years. This is my first time. In any case, how do we pick up the 20 family? Like how do we handpick? I think I heard Dr. Ballard say something in the building. They pick up the people, the 20 families.
Mrs. Tong, we asked the building principals to recommend families. We gave them criteria of the types of families that we were looking for, but then because they know the population, we asked them to provide recommendation. And again, it was a wide range as board members that participated. It was a wide range of families and their experiences. Some that were positive, some that were more challenging, all that had suggestions on how we can improve on what we're doing. But yes, they came from the schools.
Okay, thank you for that. And I was very happy that I went the last Thursday, I believe. That family was very grateful that Dr. Balaj was there. And it's my first time. So I will have a firsthand experience, like really helpful to see her from the family, how our school district is helping the children and how can we move forward to, I guess, have better for the future, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
And Ms. Tong, we had a wonderful discussion with that family. The kids came down and spoke with us. We spent about an hour and 15 minutes with them or so in their home. But yes, it was, there was a lot of information. And as an aside, I've had additional follow-up on the conversation that we've had with the parent and with staff members in the district based on some of the things that we talked about that night.
Yes, that was very wonderful. I wish I can go a few more, but I think it's already ended. I came to the last bit of it. The other thing I want to, this may not be the topic for our discussion, but it may, I'm not sure. I guess the sex education or the CRT, does it, anything relate to this, what we talk about? If not, let me know. We can discuss it another time.
So we don't currently have anything in our goals covering those 2 areas or those 2 topics. I don't know that we will, but that really is not. So remember, the district goals are just a snapshot of things that are going on. Everything that goes on in the district can't be included within the specifics necessarily of these goals and what we're talking about. This just keeps things out in the public. CRT, critical race theory, we don't have in the district. It's not a K-12 topic. It's not something that we include. We spent a lot of time last summer, last fall talking about that. The revision in the health and physical education standards that came from the state, the Department of Ed is relooking at what was out there. Dr. Mahan was reported out at board meetings that she and Dr. Morton are looking to impanel a curriculum committee that will meet this summer and do those curricular revisions, which ultimately will be presented. There's been a lot of discussion publicly about it, a lot of information shared, most of which has not come from the Department of Ed, and none of it that it's been developed or used here. But those really wouldn't fit into what we're doing with the goals here. So
Thank you to clear that. Thank you.
Okay, well, since we're going long form for number one, I wanted to try to close a couple things. First, so there's a parallel process for the family interviews. It's my desire that board members give notes on every meeting that we had, which will be a long form. What Dr. Malash will give us is a short form of kind of what gets synthesized and what comes up to kind of an actionable level. But we want to try to take board members to the scene of this because the intent was for board members to really be in these meetings. And if you read some of the notes, you'll feel like you were right there. As relates to Hanover, what we've asked administration to do is to delve more deeply into the themes and the data of the goals, not so much to give us direct access, but to spend some time with it. And you recall I said, look, we're about to head to spring break. Let's give them a little extra time. But we want to know, I think, and maybe that's the 10th or maybe it's the 24th, but whatever it ends up being, as administration has sat with us with access to the dashboard, what can we distill? Because I think there were a lot of people who thought there were maybe some themes or maybe something, but everyone on the board that spoke, I believe, said we really need more granularity. And that's something that really the administration can bake. For me, in terms of number one, I think a lot of great points. I like the idea of cross populations. I certainly like the idea of focusing on students on the ELL side and that identify Latinx. I do like the idea, though, of multiple populations. This year was part of our goal to maybe think about, maybe we did get to some of them, but I don't know that we got to people who identify homeless or something like that. So there are still, and so that's kind of I don't know if 20 is the right number. Maybe it is, maybe we start it, or maybe we do 2 periods of time and maybe we try to get a couple different perspectives. I have found it very, very valuable. Okay. So start times, yeah, that's in process of some kind. I think the overdeveloped policy in the S12, we have heard some things come up about looking at that. It's great to see that. I do think for CPEACE, it does lead us to the question of, what is CPEACE, and is it CPEACE that's giving us the presentations, or is there some other iteration that's more appropriate? And I'm fine either way, but I think we do want to be explicit there. Let's see here. Okay, so that's more or less there. So the Quaglia stuff that we did years back, now I don't want to lose that sense of history. Is that something that's part of number 2, or how does that fit into where we're going with Hanover? Is Hanover the next iteration of that? I just don't know how that relates.
Oh, good question. Actually, Dr. Morton and Dr. Mahan and I were discussing the Qualia Institute this morning. Dr. Mahan's reaching back out to Dr. Qualia. We did not formally engage with them contractually during the course of this year. 4 years, I guess, Dr. Mahan, right? For about 4 years when we had a formal relationship with them, and we have members of their staff were here in district multiple times throughout the course of the year, assisted with the development of the aspiration student voice teams at the schools. Much of what we learned from them, the work is continuing in the district, still exists. We were just talking for next year about whether or not we'll do something formal with them. So more to come on where they are. So the concept of student voice is something that we have championed as a district. The folks on the administrative team at the building level find it to be incredibly important. The board, nothing makes me happier than when we're in board discussion, the board members are talking about student voice and the importance. So it's ingrained within the district, which is something that, has taken time to put through. So it'll always continue to be a part of the work. How do we do that in terms of training? Because there were surveys that we used from Qualia. Hanover was different. It's a different type of survey than what Qualia did in terms of the target. So yeah, there'll be more to update. I don't have really where we are, other than we're going to reach out and see if there's going to be something formal with them.
And Dr. Marsh, I'm going to turn right over to you, but just so people know, we asked for a show of hands to work on a subcommittee after this meeting, after we did the sort of issue identification. So don't feel like we need to solve anything tonight. But so Miriam, my esteemed colleague, is going to lead up a group. She and I did this together last year, but on the group will be the other Ben, or the artist formerly known as Ben, as I sometimes call him. Joel and Jen raised their hands first. Now, At the same time, the committee's small enough that, you'll have to come to the board and get input at various things is the way that we've envisioned that. But there's a lot more to come. So we don't necessarily have to get to anything, but in terms of issue identification and probing a little bit, it's perfect time to do it. So with that, let's head to purpose and passion next.
Thank you, Mr.
Real
Vadia.
quick, if I could, just want to make sure I captured the main points that were discussed. Action 2, a little bit more discussion on HIB.
And discipline, please. Discipline and conduct, please.
And Dr. Malash, excuse me, Mr. Ovadia, just a reminder that we are at a little bit after 7 p.m., so we're about halfway through our meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson.
Thank you.
Mrs. Wilson is serving as our timekeeper again this evening. So much appreciated.
Greater from the diverse populations under action 3. And then we also had conversation about the crossing of multiple families that are in multiple categories. Talk about the Hanover research, looking at action data results that are driving our actions, at least having the board understand. And then the mental health focus.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. So the second goal is purpose and passion. Develop highly engaging learner-centered experiences within an environment that promotes voice, choice, and passion for learning. Same thing, we didn't touch on or trot on the objective and strategy. We would suggest looking at this to cut it a little bit, right? Tighten it a little bit. Major activities, the first one, student achievement is the top word priority. Formative and summative assessments, locally administered state assessments will be used to define achievement. Part of the blueprint for student success, review and analyze the curriculum based on student achievement through the curriculum management and revision cycles. Again, go through the different resources and timelines, bless you, with what we were looking at for this year. Indicators of success, presentation to the board by the district coordinator of research and assessment on the Start Strong data to show baseline performance. Remember, everybody in the state administered the Start Strong back in the fall. That was delivered on January the 11th. Measured growth demonstrated in student performance and identified indicators of academic success. Again, coming through with her presentation or their presentations. NJSLA testing, that's the state assessment. This is tentative as there has not been usable data for 2 years. And we are in the process, Dr. Mahan, of, right, Mr. Blavinsky, that administration is currently going on. Eureka math outcomes, same thing. It's in process. Then consideration 22, 23, and 23, 24 of growth from the baseline data established in 21, 22, where we will get to that baseline data after we finish administering the tests and getting the results back. So a couple of pieces that are done, some of those things that need to be done, like the presentation, from our Office of Research and Assessment has to be done every year. There are requirements of that. That's not necessarily anything that has to go in there. We put it in there just because to be overt with where we were this year and get that piece. That's going to happen one way or the other. But really to take a look at where we are. Some of that information we will not have until the summer at the earliest, most likely in the fall. The second piece, equity, diversity, hiring and recruiting, staff training, analyze hiring practices and outcomes and diversifying certificated staff. One of the things that Miss Adrian and her team worked on, updating job descriptions and postings to reflect DEI values, identifying and implementing non-traditional pathway strategies, and then standard operating procedures for hiring. We talked about this as a multi-year goal, and hiring is always going to be a goal. What the hiring and the staff looks like, who we hire, I believe will always be a part of what we do as a school district. This is something we've felt strongly about in the past, and the board in the past has felt strongly about, of listing this specific area as one of those things that's mentioned specifically in the district goals, because it is such a priority with where we are. Completed the review of the job descriptions to reflect district values of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Ms. Adrian, you're complete or still in process? In process. Thank you. And then share hiring data with the Board of Education community in the fall for 21, 22, and in the spring discussion plans for 22, 23. So we have this information ready to go. It'll come through the May cycle. Ms. Adrian, right? That's what you shared through the May cycle of the HR committee. So that's in progress is why that's yellow. And then increased diverse staffing 2023 that more closely represents the student body and define the metrics. So again, in discussion, we have some really good baseline data that Ms. Adrian will share with the committee and then we'll share with the full board to show where we were this year in comparison to previous years. Number 3, develop an actionable facilities improvement plan, develop and publish a timeframe for a bond to vote, communicate information from the facilities analysis of the current physical structures within the district to determine the scope, identify projects to be included in the bond referendum, provide for two-way communication between the Board of Ed and stakeholder groups, including students, staff, and community members, number of different areas, people responsible, administration, board, and garrison. We talked about the different things we wanted to do in board meetings, community meetings, school meetings, and town halls, presentation to community groups, presentation to town council, development of website materials, and then about when we expected the applications to be submitted, and then looking at the late September, which we actually know now is going to be October 4th, it's the referendum date. So submission of project applications to the New Jersey Department of Education by January of 2022. They weren't submitted by January, but they've all been submitted to the state. Securing a response from the NJDOE in a timely manner for fall 2022 referendum. That's in process and is rolling right now. We'll continue going through this month. Coordination and publication of project plans utilizing both capital reserves and operating budget. Mrs. Sugars was doing that during the course of the winter, delivering it in the presentations in in March and April, ultimately with the adoption of the budget for 22-23. So that's been completed. Then documentation of process from seeking grants for facilities improvements. Been working with Bruno and Associates, the grant writers this year. We've had some success with them. We've had some success with grants, not a lot of success in terms of facilities improvement with the grants, although we submitted a couple of large grants this past year for facilities and playgrounds, although we were not successful in the awards. So again, a mix of in progress. There are some of those things that absolutely will need to continue over into next year. Number 4, staff development will be personalized, intensive, ongoing to support the professional learning needs of staff. Again, a wide group of folks and areas, consultants, the SCIP team, curriculum and people services supervisors, building administrators, the admin team. This is a multi-year goal. And again, one of the most important things that we can be judicious and focused on with staff is the type of professional development, how it's embedded and how it is used. So specific areas that we had for success in February 2022, report out on 2-year progress with robust school examples and overall district progress within 3 strategic vision goals. Report on the professional development program in the district from July 21 to January 22. Recall February 22nd, when we were down in the all-purpose room, we had some of the building principals along with our assistant superintendents deliver information and updates. In May of 2022, report out on plans for professional development for summer 2022 and 2023 school year. May 24th, we'll have a presentation. Dr. Mahan, Dr. Morton, and their teams have been working on some great information. And then SMART goal documentation from building goals, which we have and we'll share. And then for next year, continuing with purpose and passion. Student achievement, student learning, again, as we list in here, it's top board priority. One of the primary focuses of our responsibility after student safety and wellness comes the academic achievement. So we would suggest that that continues. And then board and staff responsible would be continuing similar resources that are available. Timelines, again, continuing. We expect it to be multi-year goal, continue with regular updates through CNI. The developing plans for 22-23. It'll be delivered by August 1st of 22. Indicators of success, presentation by the board. We kept this in, like I said earlier, this has to happen, will continue to happen. We'll talk about what that looks like. Measure growth demonstrated in student performance on identified indicators of academic success. We can be more specific on what those indicators are in terms of targeting. We expect in discussion that will come through and they'll be kind of going back and forth between the board group and the administrative group about what does that look like? What are the suggestions? NJSLA, Eureka math outcomes will be into the 2nd year with the administration across the district of Eureka and the consideration from the baseline data once we receive that baseline data, because that will need to be built once it comes through this summer. Then in the second one, equity, diversity, hiring to keep this on as we had it this year. We kept in as well, review the job description to reflect as Ms. Adrian said, that is in process for this year. Share the hiring data with the board in the fall for 22-23 and in the spring, then continuing, and then increase the diverse staffing, and looking at 20% plus of the hires will be diverse. So we want at least, I believe Ms. Adrian's certificated staff, instructional staff, it was 18%, if I recall, right, for this year. We were more successful in every other category except for instructional staff this year. And the 18% was actually a decline from where we were over the last couple of years. Some of that were with the challenges with the hiring pool and the reality of college prep programs. Number 3, develop an actionable facilities plan, facilities improvement education plan, develop and publish the time for the bond vote, which will continue, hold the bond referendum vote on October 4th, provide for continued two-way communication between the board and stakeholder groups, including staff, students, community members, similar groups, similar development of website materials, the bond referendum, back to school nights scheduled for September of 2022. And then feedback and support from community stakeholder groups, successful referendum vote on October 4th. We kept this in here because, again, this is going to be a primary focus, has to be a primary focus of where we are as a school district. A lot of what we do and where we are is going to be measured by the success of this referendum vote in October. That's going to have a dramatic impact on us as a district. And then 4th, staff development will be personalized, intensive, ongoing to support the professional learning needs of staff. Again, continuing very similar in terms of the outcomes, in terms of the measures with where we are. Some of the more specifics will come out, from Dr. Mahan, Dr. Morton, Mrs. Wethington, Ms. Mallory. When they do their presentations, we get the information from the buildings, but from the board perspective, to continue this process and continue this as a primary area for development.
Board members.
Mrs. Fleischer?
Thank you so much, Mr. Vadia. I have two things. They could be questions or just comments. Number 3, and maybe Mr. Adams, you can help with this too. And this might be a whole other thing that we need to talk about, but providing a way for provide for two-way communication between the Board of Ed and stakeholder groups, including student, staff, and community members. I think this is always something that we are very cognizant about as far as the communication, but we want to have more and we want to do it better.
Okay.
So it might be something that we can talk about in our group, I'm thinking, but I wanted to bring it up now just as something that there might be some other ways in which we can communicate better. So I just wanted to sort of put that out there, that might be something that specifically we'd want to talk about in our smaller group.
One question I would ask is, you have town halls, I see them listed. Are they, is the purpose of them, we're focused on communicating referendum information and keeping folks informed there? Or are town halls a normal part of your communication plan from a normal perspective? And what I mean by that is, you may have 2 town halls a year, one in the fall, one in the spring, and a committee of board members attend.
Mhm.
Because you don't want a quorum, because then it becomes a board meeting and you can't have the conversations that you like to have. But that forum is more of a come meet the superintendent, the BA, and a committee of the board members to talk.
Yeah.
No commitments. It's like information sharing. Superintendent or the BA may have a couple of things they want the group to hear about, but it's an opportunity for them to dialogue with you, where
Sounds
you don't
great.
get that opportunity at public comment and regular board meetings. So,
Yeah.
but I didn't know whether the town halls here seem to be focused on, we've got a referendum we're working on.
Ben can probably speak more. It's normally like a goal specific or a theme specific or a project specific.
Yeah. So Jesse, typically we've done, well, the community really wanted to have town halls. That's the first thing. I mean, I don't recall that we did any sizable number in years past. So we had actually, based on the district goals work of last year, we had quite a few things that we wanted to talk to people about to define issues. So we've done school start times, we've done middle school redistricting, elementary redistricting, We've done quite a few around the referendum. So we did about 25 referendum-based understand the issue meetings in the fall and the winter. What we've not done though is what you're suggesting. And so that's something we could consider is to have a generic. The only thing is with every plus side, there's a negative side, which is that once a board member says one thing and these things are streamed, it will typically be harder to work out that that's one board member's opinion.
Yeah.
And that's where I often get stuck.
And-
So
And that's where you have to be careful. That's why it's a committee. Committee cannot speak on behalf of the board, and it's not a commitment kind of conversation. It's more of, you want to hear from them. That's what it's an opportunity for the public to talk to you, throw ideas out, give you information. But your response, superintendent's response, is more of, we're hearing you, we're taking information, and that committee is going to come back and report. That town hall committee, which is typically, I always recommend, a committee of board members, the BA and the superintendent, and then the superintendent may bring other staff members, depending on, there may be a topic that they want to bring up that night as one slider to say, hey, just want to let you know X, Y, and Z, but now let's open it up. Let's have a conversation. That's an opportunity for a dialogue, but the board members need to understand. You need to be careful not to make a statement that might be perceived as committing the board to something. You're gathering input from your community, hearing some of their aspirations, and then you're coming back to your board to give a committee report and say, hey, we heard this, and this, and as a committee and what we heard, we're recommending we take a look at maybe these two items because we think there's possible merit in us researching it. Community starts to see that on a routine basis, whenever your business rhythm is, once a quarter, first half of the year, second half of the year, they start to understand. And then as some of those potential ideas get flushed out, and all of a sudden something gets implemented because you found a nugget that made sense, public's going to see, hey, they're actually listening to us. We can come to these, talk about, kick some things around. They'll bring it back to the board. And if the consensus is that there's some merit to it, superintendent and his team will dig into it. And who knows, maybe there will be a change. That starts to build your credibility and reputation as a board that's listening to your community.
Yeah. So to that point, I mean, the public has been very, generous and very good at defining a lot of the space of issues. Now, what you're talking about is bringing them to the table to say, look, what are we potentially missing as issues altogether?
Yep.
So that's a very good idea that bears absolutely some thought. Now, before we go there though, because you can always.
Yeah, just to jump in on that. So this is actually something I put in for later, Mrs. Fleischer. Actually, in our third goal, which is connecting beyond the classrooms. Actually, the idea of potentially, and this is separate from the bond. This is just a general approach. The idea of having, I wrote it down. I'm sorry, just find my notes. The community, potentially thinking about like community liaison, or I'm sorry, that's not what I wanted to say. That's something different. Stakeholder activity group. There's advisory groups. Some school districts do that. It may be something to think about. So anyway, by the way.
I just had one more quick thing, but thank you so much, Mr. Abrams. I appreciate that. The other part was number 4. I just didn't know when we're talking about the goal being developing engaging learn-centered experience that promotes voice, choice, and passion for learning, and we're bringing in with staff development. I was wondering if we could bring in, maybe even just put wellness in there as far as staff wellness and making sure that that is, touched upon, because I think it's very, very important. And I think, it's something that I would like to really see.
I'm sorry, Ms. Fleischer, for the district goal piece.
Number 4, where it says staff development will be personalized, intensive. It's saying about professional learning needs of staff, but I'm wondering if we can also extend it to wellness, professional learning and wellness, because, the goal itself is talking about passion, promote, voice, choice, and passion for learning. But I think wellness plays a big role in that. And I think that that's sort of missing. I was looking around. I don't see that anywhere for staff. because we do talk about that with the students, and it's our goal, and that's our specific goal. But I think all of you as staff, really deserve to have wellness be in these goals for us to help you help our children.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Friedel?
Okay, so with number one, student achievement clearly needs to be one of the priorities of the board. And I think historically, we have seen achievement gap issues. I think we saw with the, what was it, Start Strong data. The data is really clear. We have concerns, and our concerns are exacerbated by which side of Cherry Hill you live on. So our Title I schools in all of the assessments are not performing at the same levels as our non-Title I schools. And then you have the other title funds that come along as well for ELL and other categories. So one of the things that I think that I'd like to see looked at is how are we spending the title funding, and is it effective? So what services are we providing to our Title I families, our children, and are those services giving us results, or are we continuing year after year to be providing the same services and programs but not seeing any significant gains? So I throw that out there. And then my other question has to do with number two, with the hiring of staff, and where it says the indicators of success, increased diverse staffing that more closely represents the student body. 20% of hires will be diverse. At what level? Are we talking about staff level at the administrative office district-wide, or are we talking about the school-based level? As a parent of children who are multiracial, the school level is really critical. I mean, my children did not experience an African-American teacher until middle school. And at that time, there was only one African-American teacher at that school. And it's important for children of multiracial or single race, but it's for all children. There are leaders amongst us, and we should be really exposing everybody, that anybody can, doesn't matter what your background is, you can be a teacher, you can be a principal, you can be a child study team member, you can be a custodian, you can be a secretary. So I really would like to know a little bit more detail at what level are we looking at the diversity? That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr.
So I think just following up a little bit on what both Mrs. Fleischer and Ms. Friedel said, I specifically, because I think math achievement has been our greatest area of struggle. So specifically, and we have this new program, Eureka Math, and we're going to be looking at outcomes. I know there's been discussion of expansion of Eureka Math and even looking at it at the elementary level. So I'd like to see, and this is something that we'll talk about, is looking at more of a plan for that, and also analysis. I mean, I think this is kind of a good start, but I want to see that a little more granularly looked at. Also, we have more focus on STEAM, which is incorporating math into education. And we have it at the high school level, but I want to see too how we're, is that something that we want to take a look at the other levels, especially considering that's where there's so much focus in what our students are going to end up after they finish, post-secondary, what are they going to be doing? So that I also want to take a look at, and I don't know if it belongs in number one or even, I'm not actually sure where it would belong, but when we're talking about, the hiring of staff and also the placement of staff in our schools, what's the methodology we're using to ensure that the way that our buildings are staffed, that we're actually, we have kind of people with the skill sets in place, and or, whether they're teaching, whether they're providing other supplementary services, whether they're providing kind of a leadership and mentorship, just do we have those pieces in place? And is there, what's the plan for that from more of that, like a staffing perspective? Because we don't really touch on that so much in here, but I think that's a piece of it. Number two, I'm saying a lot of things, I'm trying to go fast. Number two, for the equity diversity piece, I think what Ms. Friedel is saying is really critical. I'm also looking at, we have so much focus on how do we improve mental health? How do we address families with special needs? How do we address SEL? But we don't have that on a goal in terms of our hiring practices. So, are we looking to hire more staff who have that training, that expertise, those certifications? So that's something else that I want to see if we can incorporate into number two. And number three, for the bond, I mean, we have, the bond vote is going to be in October. So this is a goals for next year. I think while it's important to look at this, I think we're kind of at a different phase, and it's a pretty short-term phase. Obviously, implementation is a second step if the bond does pass. So I think like developing a plan, we have a plan. So now it's really about the piece that Mrs. Fleischer was talking about, and in terms of really, we need to focus on what's our communication and education meeting with stakeholders. Where are we going next as a board? And who are the important stakeholder groups? How do we organize that? That's critical for the next month or two, really. So I think we really, the PTA is I guess they're a group, but I think they're also an important group to be looked at. So that's another piece that was on my mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, just seeing no hands, I'll go. Agree with a lot of what's being said. So two things that I just think aren't here but could be, and Dr. Malash, this stuff we've talked about, but the Coles program, right? The potential to augment that. I think probably talked about it more last year than this, but I would want to see something like that be in our goals. We just had a great presentation about getting a year's worth of college done while you're in high school. I think a focus on that, like when we talk about achievement, right? Like, what do we mean? I mean, if you can finish, with a year of college, it just seems like something that bears perhaps more examination on the board level. I think it'd be interesting to do a town hall on student achievement. I also think, I don't know if we've communicated this, but I think Dr. Malash is going to give us a presentation called Portrait of a Graduate. And I think that's something that's just good to be top of mind for the board. I mean, our product is, successful people, young people, and molding them. And what does that mean to this board and to our educational experts? And, how do we, delve into that? Totally agree. More specific indicators on academic success. I also think, diverse, I mean, we've got a percentage with diverse. I think maybe defining that perhaps a little bit more, could be interesting. Maybe this is a short version of what it is, but I just think, like, are we talking about, people with, staff members with, issues with speech, stuttering, or are we talking, like, what are we trying to do? And what do we mean when we say closely represents? I just think there's a quantified and definition that could be of interest. I do agree with my colleague to my left here. I think next phase of the bond is critical. I mean, I think just looking at what we did in the fall, winter, we've got to probably double that to really be effective in this community. That means 50 meetings, right? And so there's a huge commitment. And even though it's a short space of time, it's critically important. So I think quantifying that, looking at that, and then focusing really on on both getting the job done for October 4th and then whatever implementation would happen. Really, these goals would end next June, in theory. So we want to kind of have that. I also think with staff development, I mean, I know in companies and as things go, coming on to committees, like doing some sort of like voluntold work, but also like trying to figure out what interests are. I think that could be very interesting because we've talked about exacerbating individuals on committees over time. And I think a process that has people learning, participating, and then coming off, and then maybe mentoring to Miriam's point, or whatever it is, I think just like more of a focus on like being part of the think tank and then being able to have some time to recover, especially as we think about wellness. I just think we don't want to constantly be taxing the same individuals, but there's a lot of genius amongst our staff and professionals that we simply can't do without. So those are my thoughts. Other thoughts before we go to 3? All right, Mr. Adams.
Couple of items. We talked about looking into town halls or some kind of stakeholder community forums on an ongoing basis for your business. Staff wellness development into that action 4, bringing in addition to the professional development, well, staff wellness development. Well, comments about looking into title funding usage and services being provided, looking at the math programs for growth, expansion, getting better results, et cetera. Post-high school opportunities for students. What I mean by that is, like you said, getting credits before you leave high school, or maybe getting an internship, from a perspective of career and technical education. Those are things that probably should be looked at. Deeper dive in diverse staffing in general, and then there's a discussion about the type of skills you're also looking for. That might be incorporated into the process. And then a greater impact on bond referendum focus, so that, like Ben just said, you know what you did, right? You want to ramp it up a little more. So these are things I guess your committees can do deeper dives into.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Thank you, Mr. Avadia. So moving into our third goal, connecting beyond our classrooms, provide resources, opportunities, and experiences for our students to connect to the world beyond their classrooms and to become informed and empathetic agents of change in the world. Same thing with the objective and strategy. Try to focus this a little bit more, cut down perhaps. Major activities, there's going to be a lot of crossover between where we were this year and what we're looking at doing 21, 22, and then into 22, 23, because of the nature of what this work is. The first one, boundary adjustment, redistricting committee, analyze existing data and create a plan for middle school and elementary school levels. This is a discussion that took place beginning last spring. It's been about 13 or 14 months since originally the discussion was initiated at the board level, carried on through the summer and then throughout the fall, presentation to the board in December, and then the ongoing discussions. And the indicators of success were update presentations to the Board of Education on the work of the Boundary Adjustment Committee. Originally was in December. Plan for reconfiguration presented to the board for approval. We are not there. That's still in progress, right? It's the district's not ready for that, and the board's not ready for that, the comprehensive piece yet. So that is from this year. So those are both in progress. The second one, student pathways at the high school level. Support diverse learners through increased educational opportunities for STEAM, career, and technical education. Mr. Vadi, just to hold the thought that you had before too in the last goal, because I think what you talked about would fit in here about that year of college, for kids. So again, you see the groups that were involved in doing the work, New Jersey Office of Career Readiness, other groups. This, as we said initially, as most of these were multi-year goals, with year one being recommendations for course revisions, additions, year 2 course development, which would be 22, 23, year 3 course implementation, a presentation to the Board of Ed of a comprehensive current analysis of current STEAM and CTE opportunities, the secondary level by May of 2022. At the last board meeting on April 26, Dr. Damon and Mr. Goldthorpe delivered that presentation. A lot of information in that presentation, a lot of information to digest and to think about. Some of you, as I did, walked away. We have more questions about our next steps, right? So that's a lot. Where are we, right? What's tangible? What can we do now? What are we going to be moving on? And then recommendations for pathways in STEAM and CTE for 22, 23 and 23, 24. That's an ongoing. Number 3, world-class experiences. Analyze school district level student service, activity, and student voice opportunities to create standards across educational levels. Examine grant opportunities, internships, mentorship, and skill development. Develop opportunities for students to interact beyond the district. Create a set of best practices. develop mindset of student, local, and global citizenship through modernized curriculum and expanded community partnerships. Now, this goal is a mouthful, and proved to be a mouthful. We had this as a multi-year goal. When I get into the piece for 22-23, there's a couple of questions and requests I have for the board, for the small committee, when you're working on it, and then when we meet again to talk about it. So it's a multi-year goal. Year 1, analysis of student service activities and student voice opportunities. Year 2, development of opportunities for students beyond the district. Year 3, expansion of student opportunities and increase in documented hours. In progress, development of standards across the elementary school, middle school, and high school levels. And that is for sure an in progress piece. There is not even, a document or, something to say this is something to move forward beyond the discussion at the levels. And the second piece, report to the Board of Education in spring of 22 of progress of the work, including hurdles, opportunities, and development. That'll be on June 14th. So that is still upcoming. We have lots of discussions about the hurdles, the opportunities, and development. Will take center stage. And again, when I get to the next piece, I'm going to suggest that some of this even be broken into 2 different action steps. That's a mouthful in terms of what's here. And as we're trying to work with building principals and staff out in the buildings, it's almost too big to wrap around about what all this is to go through. So number 4, analyze district budget allocation of funds to make recommendations for future budget cycles, align use of capital reserve funding with bond referendum planning and building needs, work with grant writer to seek funding, review impact of first year contracted service. Again, some of the different groups that were involved. Budget development cycle for 22-23, completed with the successful adoption of the budget. Develop recommendations through the Business and Facilities Committee to present to the full board. Budget process initiated back in March. A completed budget was adopted, was approved by the county, adopted by the board, has been fully submitted. I'll have an updated report to present to the board on the work with Bruno Associates, who is the grant writing folks that we contracted with from the outside, as well as some additional grants that we received in district this year. One of the ones that Dr. Damon highlighted when she presented, we had applied for a $75,000 grant through the state with CT, and we were actually awarded $168,000. So more than twice of what we requested, we were awarded, which was positive. We have one grant that Mrs. Wilson worked on through the Horace Mann Foundation. We're going to launch a podcast series. So we talk about communication. Maybe one of the things we want to include, but we're going to launch a podcast series in the district as well. We hear a lot of people anecdotally talking about the use of podcasts. It is one of those things people can pull down. If we can do 15, 18, 24 minutes and have different groups, then that might be something that is effective in that sharing of information. So we'll go through that. So that was this year, 21-22. And then for next year in 22-23, and the top has not changed. Boundary Readjusting Committee needs to stay on there because that work is continuing. Update presentations to the board on the work of the redistricting committee. We can talk about timeframes. Mrs. Wethington and her committee, are engaged now, what those timeframes look like, and we can have some discussion about when and what for next year. And same thing, plan for reconfiguration, present to the board for approval. I think, Ms. Stern, when the small group meets, that's one of those pieces to talk about, probably along those same timeframes of, late fall, November, December-ish, January, in that timeframe, just because of what the fall will look like. And then the second one, student pathways at the high school. As I said, Mr. Vadi, I think this is where the piece about, doing additional investigation about, earning a year's worth of college credits prior to high school graduation would fit in. The continuation of the work, supporting diverse learners, student pathways at the high school, STEAM, career and technical ed. Presentations to the board, same thing. We did not adjust these over on the side because some of them, the second one for sure, we'd expect is going to need to continue to grow, where we see where we are in the fall. In the fall part of the discussion with class development also ties into the budget implications with staffing, with structure, and what that needs to look like at the high school level. But we know this needs to be in there with that second year being course development. Number 3, and like I said, I would suggest that this breaks into 2, right? We can talk about that some. You can, in your lens. I'm always interested to see through the lens that you all apply to it, about what that looks like and what to include. And then some of the action steps would continue, about where we are in year 2 development of opportunities for students beyond the district. Dr. Damon and Mr. Goldthorpe talked about some of that. We're having discussions about environmental education and what that looks like, internships and programs, beyond the district walls. The same thing. We'll need to talk about timeframes, where that fits and where that goes. And then we would keep the same thing year 2 and year 3. We would keep all of these in here and check off, you've italicized year 1, with the highlight for year 2 and the progress for year 3. And number 4, analyze district budget allocation of funds to make recommendations for future budget cycles. We kept this in here because this has been a constant in district goals every year. Again, whether this is listed as a district goal or not, this is something that has to happen internally. It's part of the work that Mrs. Sugars and Ms. Svitansky and their teams do. It's part of the discussions that Dr. Mahan, Mrs. Wethington, Dr. Morton, Ms. Adrian, all of the department areas that they have with their staff. It's always an analysis of how money is being spent, where we are allocating funds for staffing, for materials. That will always be a part of that. Again, the board has always seen this as a key area to include. Talking about the continued work with Bruno and Associates, where that work is. There'll be some update at BNF tomorrow, which will help to inform some of that discussion. And then where we are with the adoption of the budget cycle. This could also tie in, if we do not keep that singular piece in here about the referendum, there can be an action step in here as part of the referendum, is the referendum being one of the action steps to include, because that does tie in directly with that work. The adoption, the passing of the referendum and the follow-up steps will dramatically impact what the budget looks like and what we do and where we are. So that, that if we split number 3, and then we take the one from the previous one about the budget, there is a way to work that out, in terms of what goes through. So that's where we are.
Mrs. Fleischer?
I just had a question. It's more of a question. When we were talking about number 3, analyze school/district level student service activity, Dr. Malash, are we talking about, I remember when my daughter was in Rosa, and they were very service driven, and they would count all the hours, and people would, record that. And at the time, and I don't even know if it still exists, that, there's national programs like from the White House, and you can get different levels. Is that, it doesn't have to be that, but that's sort of what we're talking about, to sort of do something like that?
Yeah, good question, Ms. Fleischer. So that would certainly be a piece of it, and how to systematize that, right? We know anecdotally that there's a lot of stuff going on in all of our schools. There's some wonderful activities. There are some historical activities. There are some new ones that come up every year. But really the goal is to systematize it, and make sure that the opportunities that we are providing are accessible to all of our students, regardless of zip code or street address or homeschool assignment or whatever it is. And then looking to see, is there something, so ultimately that discussion would then continue on. Is there an expectation that the board has, that we have as a district, to say kids should be doing this? This should be a standard in elementary school. This should be a standard in middle school. This should be a standard in high school, to make that as part of the program. But it's developmental, but we need to find out where we are first and then have those discussions. There are some examples of different places that do programs. We were just talking about the administrative retreat. We've been in contact with some collegiate levels where they do leadership programs and some things like that, get some additional information. The folks that we work with through character.org, with the National School of Character and District Character Program, they've got some great information, again, from a collegiate level, and some of the networks of people that we've connected with, just to see what's being done. But yes, long story, that certainly is a part of where it is.
That sounds like a wonderful opportunity. And I love the idea of consistency and availability for all the children across, because we have so many schools and there's so many different opportunities. So thank you. I think that's great to add, have in our goals. and
Yeah, thanks,
really
Ms.
work on.
Fleischer. And that's one that, when this activity and the major, when it came through, and then what the indicators of success really, this was a big one that grew directly out of the definition of the district goal and what that meant to the committee when that district goal was written. Because kids are going to spend more time outside of the school district than they are inside the school district, as young adults and as adults and as people. And people took very seriously connecting beyond the classrooms, become informed and empathetic agents of change in the world, right? And there are certain things we want people to be able to do, so that's a huge piece.
Dr. Root?
This is Barbara Wilson. I'm just doing another time check. We're at 7:47, just letting you know.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. Good stuff.
I wish I could. That'd be a fun skill. So one thing I haven't seen anywhere in the goals, and I think it belongs in this last one, is some sort of not policy, but like plan of action or like goals for making our schools as sustainable and climate aware as possible. I know that, as a, as listening to adults out there, not every adult yet believes in climate change, even though most scientific experts say that it's a real threat to our world. But our kids are on a different page. They've already turned that page, and they believe very strongly that climate is incredibly important. And they want us, I believe that they want to see the facilities that they spend a lot of time in following, like doing things, at least making progress toward a world that is going to sustain and stop reducing, greenhouse gases, that's going to provide kind of a future for them. Our time will pass, their time will come, and they want a good world for that. I don't think we have a district plan. I think that there was one at one point, but it lapsed. So I would love to see, at least the beginning stages of some sort of environmental plan. And I know that we have an excellent opportunity to make massive progress on that if we can get if we can get the money for all of our renovations through the bond. That, working with 1960, 70 era schools is not environmentally friendly at all. So, I think there, if that goes through, there's some easy things, but I would love us to start drafting a plan. And of course, those kind of things are forever ongoing. So, whatever plan would likely be kind of a long range plan. But, what can we do at the building and facilities level? What can we do at the curriculum and instruction level to meet the needs and the expectations of our students? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Friedel?
Mr. Avadia, I'd actually like to let the conversation go to this objective, but I thought of something I'd like to go back to with the second goal. Okay, so with the second goal, professional development, but this also ties into student wellness and potentially even to staff wellness, is trauma-informed practices, trauma-informed education. The entire world has gone through trauma in the last 2 years, on top of other traumas that our students and staff potentially have experienced in other ways. So I don't know if the board is inclined to have the administration look at, our practices trauma informed, and is that something that we would like to see happen? If it is happening, is it happening at the level that we'd like to see it? So I just wanted to throw that out before we left.
Is that focused on staff or staff and students?
Not on my microphone. I think we need to be inclusive of staff and students.
So Ms. Friedel, actually, just it's interesting the timing, because I just today attended a session at a conference specifically on that. So, and I think that ties very well into what Mrs. Fleischer said about staff mental health. And I think, this is in the, looking at the mental health task force, I think it's very timely for SEL. It just all fits in. So I would definitely be in support of that. For me, just a couple things on number 3. I think just some of the language changing, implementing the elementary school level plan, that we created, but we're going to, have a plan for implementing it. And then I mentioned just a few minutes ago, this idea of a stakeholder advisory councils. This is a way to engage we have a very engaged community that wants to be involved. We have a community that wants to have dialogue. So we have town halls, which I think have been a good start, and we get emails, which I think we've tried to respond to pretty well. And now we have committee meetings that are in person and back to individually happening so that community members can attend and have a little bit more input in terms of the question time. But, we have all these really experienced, talented people in every type of work that I think exists in this country. We probably have someone who lives in Cherry Hill doing that kind of work. And we have all this expertise and knowledge, and some of those folks volunteer their time, but we don't really have a mechanism to engage them. So, it's something that it's in my mind. I don't know if it's something the entire board would want to move forward with. But to me, having a path for them, those community members who want to engage, and maybe even we put it out there. We're specifically looking for people with areas of expertise of sustainability or whatever the topic is, trauma-informed care, whatever it is that we might have people who want to engage. So I'd love to see us looking at putting some stakeholder groups together with specific focus and not, overtaxing, but with clear goals is one thought. And then I think what for me that connects to, and I think Dr. Malash, this might be maybe a little bit speaks to number 3, because I do think that's a huge amount. It's very large. We want to have a little more specificity there. And we might have community members who can help us with this. But, one of the things we've been talking about is for years, and we've finally not finally, but we've excitedly taken a step towards that, was having we have a grant contractor. But we perhaps need a person who is overseeing community engagement, community liaison, because how are we going to do these internships? I think it's the presentation by Dr. Damon and Mr. Thank you. was so Mr. Goldup was so great. I think it's a heavy lift what we're talking about, and it's really important, and it's a large pivot for our district. So, we may want to think about, and this comes into budget, right? But perhaps having a person whose job it is to kind of help us develop the community relationships, look for grant opportunities, internship, to bring it together, because I just don't know how we're going to do that with all the other things we got on our plate. So just an idea. And it was actually, that was discussed in the alternative funding committee. It was a recommendation, is that you have kind of I don't know what we called it back then, but I just love to see if we can, and that's, long term, it's not necessarily short term. And I do want to mention that with Mrs. Sugar's, our collaboration together, Mrs. Sugar said, once we have the district goals set, we can start to work on budget alignment even in July. We'll start discussing that in BNF, and then the board will be directly, to Dr. Malash's point, the board will be directly involved in aligning together with the administration on the budget priorities, and that work will happen in the fall as well. So I think we're going to get to that piece that's been talked about for a while.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands up, so I will close out for number 3. I think, for number 2, I would want to see, and actually the last presentation, very timely, certifications of value, right? Can someone graduate as a master plumber, as a master carpenter? I don't know exactly how the levels work, but we know that Microsoft has certifications, and so does EDX. We know that we have a great junior ROTC program that is great in terms of military. But all these things, I'd love to see kind of more tightening in terms of what we're looking at and what we're pursuing. And then on the number 3 side, it just strikes me that as much as we hear about and celebrate extracurriculars, they're not necessarily in the goals, or at least not proximately. And I'd like to see them here. I think industry, we talked about engaging industry and what that means. I just to Mrs. Fleischer's earlier point, service learning, I think, you have to make sure it's accessible, especially for all our age ranges that we serve, but something, and really codifying that in sort of a standardization. There's so much to be learned. I know for me personally, service learning is some of the biggest like translatable skills I use today from my K to 12 years. And hey, if you're looking for podcast series, board member of the week. But anyway, so just some thoughts. But I think I think that 3 should definitely be split, but definitely bears. I think there's a lot of opportunity there as well. So thank you. And then Mr. Adams, we'll close up with you.
Couple of the key points that folks brought up, sustainability, but looking at that and infusing that somewhere into your goal and culture. Stakeholder advisory councils, and I added a little note next to it with defined charters, because you have to be careful. You start engaging groups. Great. Don't give them a defined charter, they can be very easily disappointed because they're off and running, and then you say, whoa, slow down. You try to rein it back in, they say, well, why'd you even ask? When you're asking for the volunteers, make sure they understand what's the charter of that you're asking them to be part of, so that what they're getting into. Community engagement discussion, and then talked about the certifications, the ability for folks to earn certifications.
Is the stakeholder advisory councils, I was gonna ask Mrs. Stern, is that a district goal or should that be a board goal? Because would they be leading that? Would we want administration to lead those conversations, or would it be something we would want to be doing as a board?
I think it can be either way. It's just a matter of how you're defining it as a district. So, what do you see the purpose of don't even give it a specific focus there, it's just a stakeholder advisory council. What is, if you put a policy or a bylaw together on stakeholder advisory council, what would that be? What would be the premise that you would form one? Right. That's going to be decided before you even talk about what kinds of councils. So that may be a board-focused kind of council. It may be an administration-led council. That's upfront, but have to decide where that falls. Find it, and then as you start to go out, that's where we're looking for a sustainability, where we're looking to create a sustainability stakeholder advisory council focused on the charter. We're looking for volunteers. So, but that last piece I just talked about, that's after you built the foundation of what you want them to, what you want this council to be, and what potential deliverables you're looking for them to bring back to you as a district and a team that you might be able to build off of.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Good.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Adams, so much. Great
I think
session.
You guys got, number one, like I said in the beginning, I love the way that Dr. Malash took the foundation and didn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, just say, hey, this is multi-year, we're growing, and increase, and it's an evolution. Yeah, like I said, I think you heard me say last year, you can't boil the ocean. Do it one pot at a time. You're
Sometimes we
moving
try,
it
Jesse.
one pot at a time. And I think you've got some great additional items for the committees to kick around to enhance what you guys are doing. Nice. It's a nice process you've got going now. I like it.
And we'll turn to Dr. Malash. Helpful tonight? A lot of input.
A lot of input, great information, great discussion. I'm looking forward to next steps. Timeframe wise, I know Ms. Stern, you're getting people together. We'll do an update at some point.
Yep.
End of the month.
We have 3 meetings scheduled in May. So I think by the end of May, we'll be able to bring everything back to the full board and have more discussion, and there'll be internal, conversations. So just again, please keep feeding us ideas, thoughts. Yeah, through email, please feed those through, through email, or if you want a conversation, I'm always happy to have conversations. So, yeah, and we'll bring that back to you. And then, with Dr. Malaj, obviously, we'll be working back and forth. So,
I'll summarize these charts and get them to Dr. Malash so that you guys have them to work with.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Adams. Yeah, just looking forward to it. And then again, as I said, as we started, we'll look to get these adopted by the end of July at the very latest. We can do it earlier. Kudos to us for being in that piece. One of the things that I'll speak with Mr. Avadia and Ms. Stern about is the board self-assessment. I do think that's one that we've talked about for a number of years, and we can talk about that process during the summer, just because of where we are time frame wise. It's much more comfortable because we'll be done, this piece of it, and then we can move on. So yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you all. And thanks to the team. Thank you all for being here, providing the resources and so much work.
Board members will need you for 5 extra minutes, but I'm going to make a motion to adjourn this meeting. Do I have a second? Mr. Mayor, all in favor, say aye. That sounds like enough. Thanks.